Hey friends, Patrick here. Welcome to a tutorial about authentication with the .NET 8 Web API. And oh my gosh, it is so much easier to implement authentication now with registering for an account, logging in, refresh tokens, lots of stuff, even two-factor authentication. You only need some entity framework boilerplate stuff and then almost one little line of code in your program CS. We're using the older controllers because I do not want to use minimal APIs because they look like Node.js and I don't like Node.js and Express. I want my old controllers, please. So we're going to do this in this tutorial, and if you like it and learn something, then please guys, as always, hit the like button, smash it if you like to. Subscribe to my channel, it does make a difference. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to all my patrons. I love you guys, every single one of you, and if you want to support me too, scroll a bit further down in the video description and there you have the option to. Thank you very much for considering, and now let's start with the tutorial. A little information up front: this feature is actually already available since .NET 8 Preview 4. You see here May 16th, well, May the 4th would have been so much better. But anyways, authentication and authorization. This is what I am talking about in this tutorial, and you see it here. They are excited to introduce Map Identity API user, the type of the user you want to use. This is pretty much the only line you need. Well, of course, you need some more code, and this is what we're going today in this tutorial. And the amazing, well, it's everything about this is actually really amazing. But one thing in particular, I think, is that you can choose if you want to use bearer token authentication, not JSON web token authentication. Bearer, it's another bearer, it's a string in a sense, or cookie authentication, right? But you will see how this works in a couple of minutes in this tutorial. So here now I've got Visual Studio, this one here, that's the right tab. The preview edition 17.8.0 preview 2, because I'm using the release candidate 1 of .NET 8. But maybe you're watching this after the full release of .NET 8, so you don't have to care about that. We want to create a new project, and I want to create a web API. So this shall be an ASP.NET Core web API in that case. Let's call this .NET 8 Authentication maybe. Again, using .NET 8 Preview, configure for HTTPS, and as I mentioned in the intro, I want to use controllers. I want them, I like them. It's more structured and organized in my opinion. And again, the new minimal APIs remind me of Node.js and Express, and I don't really want that. So controllers for me, let's pin the Solution Explorer if it wants to. Default stuff, right? We've got our program, it's JS. It's not JS, CS, weather forecast here, typical example, right? And now what we want to do is we will create a data context with Entity Framework, or using Entity Framework and SQL Server Express. If you don't have Express installed and you want to, well, code along with me, then I recommend installing SQL Express. Just Google for it, download it, and maybe even get the Management Studio for that. Then it's easier to have a look at the database, but you don't really need it. So first step, again, would be a data context, right? Using Entity Framework. So let's create a new folder first. Call this data here, and in here now I will create a new item, and typically I just call this data context. And if you're already familiar with Entity Framework, then you maybe know that when you're creating your own application database context, whatever you name it, you have to inherit from a DB context, right? And with control period, we get the quick fix menu, and it says maybe you want to install this package here, Microsoft Entity Framework Core. And yes, that's absolutely true. I want that package because I want to use Entity Framework with code first migrations. But the thing is, since I now want to use identity for my authentication stuff, I'm actually not using the DB context. I'm choosing something else. And that, my friends, would be the, Jesus, tooltip, go away, IdentityDbContext. And when I now have a look here, I also get the suggestion for Microsoft ASP.NET Core Identity Entity Framework Core. And yes, I absolutely want that as well. So that's what we need. And additionally, we also need a teeny tiny constructor here with one argument that is of type DB context options, no, not builder, that one. And then our type, data context, say name is here options, and we choose the base constructor. I use this thing as well. And we are pretty much done with our data context here. All right, so with that, we have a data context and we make sure that we want to use the identity one. This means we get a couple of tables already when we create our database. One more hint, the typical user entity that is used by identity is the so-called identity user. All right, that's the one here. And you can, of course, override this thing or add some more properties to that thing. We do that, by the way, in the .NET Web Academy. But just so you know, if you want to use your own user and inherit from the identity user, then you have to specify this thing here regarding the type. See it here, T user, well, the type user. But if you want to use just the standard stuff, and for that tutorial, I think this is totally enough and sufficient. Same thing, right? Enough and sufficient. Anyways, then we do it like that. Okay. Enough with the data context. Now what we want to do is we just go back to our program CS, and here now still entity framework boilerplate stuff. We register our data context. So for instance, here now we say builder services and then add DB database context, and that should be our data context. Lots of tooltips today. That's the one, okay, and please use, yep, that's the correct one. Add some options here because we need a connection string for our SQL Server database. Of course, we could have used SQLite as well, would be maybe a bit simpler, but I pretty much always use the SQL Server, so here let's use it as well. Maybe this is more production ready then. Tell me in the comments if you're using SQL Server as well. And for that, we've got this use SQL Server method, and we need another NuGet package for that. That is unfortunately not recommended here or suggested here. So let me fix that real quick. We go to browse, and here we say Microsoft Entity Framework Core, and then SQL, oh, where was it? There, SQL Server, the Microsoft SQL Server database provider for Entity Framework Core. That's what we need. Can actually use the pre-release version, right? Because we're using .NET 8 as well. So let's have a look again. SQL Server, there it is. All right, so let's install this thing. I accept. And additionally, we also need the design. Oh, there it is. All right. No, it's gone. Design package for the code first migrations. And since I now added the pre-release packages, let's update the other ones. No update. Yep. Just remove the filter here and update the other ones as well. I accept, and we should be good to go. So we've got the SQL Server is missing still. Okay, here it is. Let's try that again. I accept, and now it is here. All right, and now we should get, yeah, using Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Great, and now the connection strings. So here now, what we're going to do is simply say builder and then configuration, because I want to add the connection string to the app settings JSON, typical stuff, right? And here we will call this also default connection. All right, and now let's go to the app settings, and here we add connection strings and the default connection, again in my case, because I am using a SQL Server Express locally, would be server is period / SQL Express. The database, let's say, is .NET 8 authentication maybe. And then we set trusted connection to true. And trust server certificate also true. Okay, so hopefully everything is correct. Let's save that. Go back to the program CS. Let's add a parenthesis here. And now let's make this a bit bigger so we see everything. Okay, so we've got our data context. We have registered our data context. And now we can add authentication and authorization. For that, real quick, I'm currently creating a .NET 8 Web Dev Jumpstart course, which will be available for free. We're going to have a look at web APIs and entity framework there, for instance. And if you want to be the first to know when this thing is available, then I recommend just check out the link in the video description and I will send you an email when you can get it. So scroll a bit further down and then you know what to do. And now let's continue with the tutorial. We start with builder and then services and then add authorization. Okay, so far nothing really changed. And the other thing that we also need is the identity API endpoints. So for that we say builder services add identity API endpoints with now the identity user. Again, in your case, maybe you want to use another entity here, then just put it there and it should also work. And then add entity framework stores. See it here, adds an entity framework implementation of identity information stores. So we get a bunch of tables when we now run our migration. And of course we have to specify the DB context here. That's it. And now comes the amazing part, really. Here we just add another middleware. Here we just say app and then map identity API again for the identity user, and that's it. This is the new magic in essence, but before we can test that, we have to run our migration. So we go to the package manager console and make sure to use the proper directory here. So now we are there, and now we can say .NET EF. If you have the tools installed, I have to mention that. So if you don't have the entity framework tools installed, what you can do is tool install -- global and then .NET -EF. All right, I already have it installed. So what I can do is update them or uninstall and then install them again. All right, and with .NET EF, we see that this version now is installed. And you also see the commands here. So now what we can do is .NET EF migrations and simply say add initial for the initial migration. Build a starting. And it seems we forgot the design package. All right, that's the case when you try to do these tutorials. Real quick, when the baby is asleep. So again, NuGet packages. And now here again, we try to find the Microsoft ASP.NET Core. There it is. Design, please. That's the one. Install. I accept. And now let's try that one more time. All right, so I had to play around here and it seemed there was really a mismatch with the versions, or it just isn't a great idea to use the release candidate 1.NET 8 version of Entity Framework Core Design. I don't know, that was an issue. Maybe for you it isn't anymore because you already have the full release of .NET 8. Anyways, now as you can see here, build started, succeeded. Now we've got our migrations folder here. And when you have a look, you see it will create a table, ASP.NET roles, ASP.NET users, typical identity stuff, right? So we can say .NET EF database update, and with that then we will get our tables. They will be created, as you can see here, almost. All right, there's an issue I got several times now. So here we just set this to false. Try that one more time. And now you see all the commands. Seen it, right? Okay, you can stop the video if you want to read them. But now we've got our tables and now we can finally run our application. And drum roll, here it is. And as you can see, whoa, lots of endpoints here, right? Of course, here we've got our weather forecast. Okay, that's the example stuff. All right, but here now, register, login, refresh, confirm email, and so on, even two-factor authentication and so on. But let's just try registering and logging in. Great thing is when we try it out like that, it already says email address is not correct. And even when we say something like string.string.com, it says, nope, the password has to be changed as well. Of course, you can configure that. If you want me to tell you how, please tell me that in the comments, then I will make another video about that. But let's just say we use the proper password, string, ! 1, for instance. Copy this because we will need that. We hit execute and see it here, success. We have our account. All right, and now we can log in. Try this out. You can already see there's something else, right? Use cookies, use session cookies, but let's just leave it at that. We say email and password, we say execute, and we add a comma up here, and then we get our bearer token. Isn't that amazing? It expires in 3600 seconds. We've got a refresh token here. Token type is bearer. And now when we want to test that, let's do that real quick. For instance, when we now say our weather forecast controller here, we add authorize, all right. And now when we, refresh our application, of course, and now try to run this, we hit execute, doesn't work, right? So we have to add one more thing to our Swagger configuration. So let's go back to the program CS real quick. There we are. And here now we can say options, and then options, add security definition, OAuth 2, which is a new Open API security scheme. Let's just use or add the using directive. And here now we can specify some things, meaning we can set the authentic or the authorization header. So here now we say parameter location is the header. Then the name of the header is again authorization. Then we set the type, which is security scheme type API key. And down here we say options, operations filter, operation filter, security requirements operation filter, and for that we also have to install a package, not the pre-release, please. And with that now we get the option to set a bearer token, all right? So as you can see, now we've got a button to authorize here, and down here we also see this little log icon. So this means that we have to be authorized. So let's try that one more time. We just log in, try this out, add our email and password with the comma here. We hit execute. All right, there's now our token. Again, this is no JSON web token, as already stated in the intro of this tutorial that you watched completely, right? And now here, you just copy and paste it. We write bearer, paste our token. We are authorized now. Log icon has changed a little. We hit execute, and we get our weather forecast data. Isn't that great? And here you see that the token has been added to the authorization header. One more thing, what about cookie authentication? So now let's just say we just refresh. All right, so now the header is gone. Nope, here we say, we try this out, hit execute. All right, and now we open the console, the developer console, and you see it here already. Here are the cookies, right? And when we now say you wanna, log in here and use cookies. So try this out. Cookies true. String at string.com, and the password was string ! 1. We hit execute. We do not get a token, but we have a cookie here, right? Isn't that crazy? And now when we try that again, we get our data. So you can decide, do you want to use bearer tokens or cookie authentication? And that's everything. Isn't that amazing? So I hope you guys learned something and you liked this tutorial, this new feature. If so, hit the like button. Please subscribe to my channel. Really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much to all my patrons for supporting me. If you want to support me too, please check out the video description for the link. And now I can just say thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you next time. Take care.